I'm going to talk first a little bit about how a project comes together, the things that you need to do, and this applies for the most part for global grants as well as district grants. So the first thing you really want to do is get this document, Guide to Global Grants. It's on the Rotary website. You can just Google Guide to Global Grants, and oddly enough, it's the very first one that comes up, and download it. It's 40 pages. That's why we don't have it in your book. It's right there. Just save it as a PDF or print it if you like. And it's a great document, and it lays out all the steps that you really need to follow to do a good job. And again, many of those things apply to both types of grants. A successful grant project, there's 5 key elements. That's meeting community needs, a plan for the project, a budget, goals, and stewardship. And now the first thing is success. That's in the eye of the beholder. Beholders aren't you. You're not the beholder. It's those that are funding it and those that are benefiting from it. So you want to make sure that if you follow these, you'll make sure that you are meeting their needs. And that starts with a community assessment. In a district grant, it doesn't have to be formal. It's often in your very own community. So you kind of know, you talk to your other community leaders, and that's how you come up with the project. But in the international projects, it's not what you think they want, it's what they need. And they'll tell you what they need, typically, if you ask and you work with them enough. And in a global grant, there's a formal process that we'll talk about in a minute. The project plan, say what you're going to do. Your budget, what it's going to cost. The goals, you set ahead of time measurable goals so that you can not only do what you said you were going to do, but you can prove it. And by setting the goals properly, you'll be able to prove it not only to yourselves and your partners, but also to Rotary International as well as the rest of the world. And stewardship, Roberto is going to talk about stewardship, but that's making sure that the money is spent wisely and properly and nobody is improperly benefited from it. So the community needs assessment, it's simply, as I said, a discussion with the community members. With the international ones, there's a little more formal process, and quite often you're going to want your international partner to work with you on that. But it's also, in addition to determining the needs, but determining the resources, your resources as well as their resources, so you can make sure you can actually do what you say you want to do. With the project plan, you want to have, in a district grant, 3 members from your club on the committee divide the work, so that not everybody is going to want to be the numbers person or everybody wants to be boss, it seems like in Rotary, but one person can be boss. And then somebody that's going to follow up on the details. You really need a detail person because you have to keep track of those details. Then go through the planning process of your implementation, a realistic funding plan. Are you actually going to be able to get the money you think you need, or do you already have it? The budget, make sure that you have a realistic budget. Don't try and say, well, we're going to try and skinny this down and make it cheap. If you get halfway through the project and you ran out of money, guess what? You're not going to get any more from the grant. Whatever you apply for and whatever gets approved, that's it. So if you run short, you're going to have to come up with the money yourself. Number 2, a contingency plan. Quite often, things don't go the way you planned. We've all had that happen in our lives. So you need to have, what can you do? How can you either accomplish what you expected to do in a different way, or maybe you can't do what you thought you wanted to do. Maybe you can do something else and use that grant money. You can't just make that decision on your own. If you run into the need to go to Plan B, you must get permission to make the change. District grants, global grants, regardless, contact me to make sure that I can get permission from Rotary International. If you don't get permission, you're toast. You won't get reimbursed. And then document retention. And that's, again, part of proving that you did what you said you would. And you have to save that stuff for 5 years, and Roberto will go into that in greater detail. Didn't I already talk about budget? I think I talked about that enough, other than disclosing conflicts of interest. You absolutely must, in any time there's a situation where a Rotarian or some other person is going to benefit from this, you have to tell us about it. If it's a Rotarian, you have to explain why the Rotarian is the best way to go. It probably won't affect anything, but if you don't disclose a conflict of interest, and that's in the eye of the beholders, not you, so err on the side of caution, yes. She asked for an example for conflict of interest. If you're buying from a Rotarian, you want to either avoid that or explain why. Any other questions on that? Sustainability. Sustainability is pretty straightforward. Will it be around for 5 years? But importantly, the goals. The goals, and you have to define these. You have to define it for global grant as well as district grants. They have to be measurable. They have to. You have to have a baseline so that you know that you know what did you do? What if you're trying to help people with their health? How many people did you help? And how did you figure out that you actually helped them? Through health records or whatever. If you have trouble coming up with that, again, you can talk to me or there's others I can direct you to. They don't always have to be quantitative. People think all your goals, to be measurable, they have to be quantitative. Not necessarily. For example, health, just simple health records will do the trick. So let's talk a little bit about global grants. And Rick's going to go through an example of a global grant application in a minute. And in fact, it's going to be the global grant application for the Howie Family Health Center in Ethiopia. This is past District Governor Donna Schmidt's program. She started this in 2014, got the grant approved in 2017. It's a massive project, $188,000 and change. And that doesn't count the building. The building was actually built because you can't use a global grant to construct the actual building. That was funded separately through the Howie family, a separate fund that they supplied most of the money as well as some matching from the Rotary clubs. So what this was, and Rick's going to go walk through it, but basically it's to provide health services for 25,000 people in this large village area in Ethiopia. And it was funded by 3 districts, including ours, 4 clubs, an endowment fund, and a contribution from an individual that wanted to help out, plus $70,000 from the Rotary from the Rotary Foundation in their matching funds. So you can do large projects. We have one in the hopper right now for Malawi that's between all of it is $235,000, I think is the number. So let's talk a little bit about the things you need to do. I mentioned before community assessments. It's required for global grants. In your book on page 23, there is the actual set, the document set for community assessment, and it walks you through it. You can fill it out if you want to go to whatever country you're doing this in. Remember, these are global grants. They have to be outside of Canada. They could be in the United States, just as the United States can do, our U.S. clubs can do it over here in Canada. You don't have to go there. You can have your partner with the other, that's in the other country. You have to have a partner in that host country. They can do that for you, and you might get a better assessment because they're going to go in and they're going to talk to the people the way they need to talk. Quite often, if you want to help somebody, they're going to say, oh, sure, that sounds good. Do that for us. When that's not what they really want, they just don't want to turn down. They're trying to be polite, just like we would be polite. We're not going to turn away a gift. We might re-gift it, but we're not going to turn it down. So you have to have, you would be the international club, and your partner would be the host club. Now, Rick alluded to finding partners. One way to find a partner, of course, is to go to one of these fairs, and they have them in all parts of the world. Or you can go to the international convention. Many of you might have gone to Toronto a couple years back. You hopefully met a lot of folks from around the world. It's a great way to make connections, network, find partners. It's one of my favorites. You can do LinkedIn. There's Rotary-related LinkedIn groups that you can join. Matchinggrants.org /global has a way so you can try it. People are looking for, you can post, I'm looking for a partner, or people will post that they're looking for a partner. Other international meetings. On the Rotary website, there's Rotary Showcase. You can put yours out there and maybe people will find it. Or you might find somebody that has done similar projects in the country you're looking for. So you can go there and then contact them. And also a great way is our VTT, our vocational training team members that have already gone overseas, as well as our global scholars. If they've been to that country, and many times when they go overseas for scholars, they end up going to other places in Europe or whatever they're at, Africa, and they might have connections that can help you. So that's a great way. Plus you meet some really great folks if you haven't met them already. It must be sustainable, of course, and this really is to give the right skills and infrastructure for long-term outcomes. That's really what we're looking for, and long-term is defined as only 5 years. So it doesn't have to be forever, although we like forever. And one thing that we always forget to mention, we need Rotary signage. When you do something, if it's anything other than helping individuals, we don't expect you to tattoo them. But if you have other things at schools, you can put a sign out front, and there's guidelines in your Global Grant book that I mentioned earlier. Please have signage so people know that Rotary is doing all this great work. $30,000 is the opening bid for global grants. That's $30,000 total, including the matching funds, the district DDF monies, as well as your cash money through your club or through individuals. $30,000. A little over $8,500 from you, along with our matching monies, you'll have the $30,000. So it's not a really high bar, but you really, really need to, it's not for the little $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 projects. There's no deadline. It's a rolling deadline. You can just apply whenever. When you're putting the grant together, as it starts to come together, if you want DDF, please let me or Rick know so that we can make sure that it gets eventually earmarked and we don't spend the money that you were hoping to get. And talk to Janet Kelly for vocational training team stuff as you're preparing or even think you might want to prepare. Talk to Janet. She has a wealth of knowledge. She's been doing it for a couple of years, since she was 19, I think. And Colleen Mitchell, Windsor 1918, of course, will help you with Global Scholars. And a Global Scholar program, I'll talk about that in a bit. It's a really great opportunity. Rotary.org, that's where your application is. You can go to just Google that or sign in. You're going to have to sign in if you don't have a My Rotary credentials. When you go to Rotary.org, click Join, and it's a very simple process. You give them your email and a password, and that's pretty much it. Then you can go to the Grant Center and start your application.